So again, and they'll introduce themselves and their department when they get through. So, George, take it away.
Do I use that? Yes. Okay. Hi, my name is George. I teach figure drawing in the first year at Ringling, which is all charcoal and traditional media and live models, and hasn't changed in hundreds of years, except we use LMS to convey assignments and stuff. And then I also love illustration, and then I also teach visual development in computer animation, which is like their final drawing class after mastering all the fundamentals. So there's a lot of polarized views in the illustration community towards AI. Here's a tweet from Kyle Webster, who used to work at Adobe and moved on, and Procreate took a very strong stance against using AI. But then there's also people who are really embracing AI, like Adobe and a lot of illustrators. And there's a lot of cool work where people are doing stuff traditionally and then using AI to change their work, or starting with AI and then finishing it using Photoshop or something like that. This was my experiment in the summer, where I love the illustration art of Michael Whelan. So I had ChatGPT write me a card game, and then generated hundreds of cards with ChatGPT text and Michael Whelan paintings from Midjourney, and it was really fun to play also, so I was really impressed. But I didn't want to put that in the show because I didn't feel like I had enough ownership over what I was creating. It's like too much out of my hands. So first I just wanted to share like what we do in class. Like, so in my visual development class, I have a site on Canvas which links to Ringling's library guide, which is like a very in-depth resource we made for all the students about the laws of AI that we know, the ethics, all the softwares that exist. It's really cool. The librarians at Ringling, the instructional design librarians, worked really hard, and Rick worked a lot with them, and we had an AI task force, so it's really cool. Here's some student work from like last year, where the students, some of them aren't very strong painters in computer animation, so they would like do a drawing, and then we would let them use AI to render it or like finish painting it. So you can see some sketches on the left, and then like a character design rendered with Viscom, which uses stable diffusion. So that's kind of neat because they're going to go on to model and rig and animate the character. So the VizDev for them is like a middle step that no one sees. So it's kind of interesting. Here's some pictures from a class that I taught this summer that was really interesting for me. It was a 4-day-long comic zine class that was ages 12 to 17. And I'll just break down like the days. So on day 1, all the students designed a character. And then during lunch, I had ChatGPT make a whole script for a comic book, 22 pages. And I gave them the outline that we discussed as a class, and just in like 30 minutes, it spit out this really zany adventure story. And after lunch, I handed out the script. Everybody got 2 pages. They illustrated it. This was a crazy, just draw for 2 days. And then on the 4th day, we made a zine with everybody's work all together and printed it on a machine called a risograph, which is really fun. So there's some more pictures of like the actual assembly of it. But it was a really cool project because we didn't get bogged down in the writing the script, talking about the story, brainstorming it too much. I was able to use AI in that 4-day-long class to get all the brainstorming, script writing, story structure stuff out of the way and just focus on drawing and art, which is the stuff I love. Because like in computer animation with the real college students, we spend like 2 years teaching them story structure and storyboarding, but in 4 days, I have to prioritize what I'm doing. This was the project I made with it's a little zine. I think it's out. The copies in the gallery vanished, but I'll replace them. And then there's a dragon that I drew. So I have a lot of dinosaur toys at home, and I was drawing dragons, but I'm copying my dinosaur toys to see like the size of scales and stuff. And I also grabbed this quote from Voltaire, who's an old smart guy. I love this quote because it says, originality is nothing but judicious imitation, which AI is imitating a lot, but if it's judicious is very debatable. Because I don't know how the algorithm works. How does it get the output? It's a mystery, even though it's been explained a lot. And then if you're an artist, how do you create stuff is also a mystery to me. If I have a dream and it's really cool and then I sit down and draw it, did it come from me or my subconscious or the movie I watched the night before or the comic book I read? I don't know. This is what I made for the art show. I suck at rhyming. I like drawing. So I had ChatGPT write silly little limericks, and then I drew a lot of dragons. That's my theme. So sometimes I just drew a dragon that I was excited to draw. Sometimes I asked ChatGPT for the limerick first, and then I drew that. I also tried like doing a drawing and asking ChatGPT to describe it and select that way. I draw really fast, so the comic book maybe has 20 dragons in it, but I probably drew like 50. And that's how I use Midjourney or something else too, where I make a big batch of stuff and then I edit things out, Just like as a teacher, people show me drawings and I'm giving them feedback and then they're changing it and we're going back and forth, iterating. So here's a page from there where you can see the artwork and then the poem, and it was really cool. I am excited about AI, that all the stuff I don't want to do, it can help me do, and then the stuff I want to do, I can do. So I want to draw, and I want to make art. I don't want to write text. I don't want to email people. I don't want to apply for grants. I don't want to make music. I'd love to make a video game where the programming and the gameplay and the story structure tree and the programming is all done by somebody else, and then I get to do the art. And as a kid, I was very curious, and I would talk to adults a lot until people would be annoyed. They'd be like, "Okay, George, it's enough questions. Like, go read the encyclopedia." So as soon as I got talking to ChatGPT, it was so fun because it's inexhaustible. Like, I'll be like, "Give me a list of 40 purple birds," and it'll list them. And I'll be like, "I've never heard of this one. Can you tell me about it?" Like, okay. And then, where does it live? And how does it reproduce? And can I have it as a pet? And where can I see it? And I can just ask and ask and ask. And, my wife wakes up at 8 in the morning and she's like, "Did you go to sleep?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. I wasn't talking to ChatGPT for the last 12 hours. So that's cool. So here you can see some details and like the assembly of the artwork. The risograph prints one color at a time. So I did an ink drawing and then I fed it into ChatGPT and paired it up with text, and I had fun matching it with a nice font. And I print each color one at a time, and then I have to fold and staple it and make each book by hand. I made a batch of like 80 books. That's it. So, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for George? I can run around.
Yeah.
What's the process for applying the color in the risograph? How does that work?
get
Oh, yes.
How do you apply color with the risograph? How do you get the gradients and delineate where to put the color for the risograph?
Right. So The risograph is a copy machine, like a Xerox machine that was built in the 1980s in Japan. And we have one on campus in our makerspace. And you have to replace the large ink drum each time you want to do a new color. We probably have like 12 colors here. So you open the machine, take out the ink drum, replace it with a new ink drum, and each color you do black and white artwork, and then you put in like a red ink cartridge, and whatever is 100% dark is pure red ink, and if it's 50% then it's paler, you know, and stuff like that. It's also a little wonky and quirky, so it doesn't have great registration that you might be used to in traditional printmaking, which is part of the charm, that you're mass producing, but there's this random element that makes each print slightly unique. Yeah.
Other questions for George? All right. Okay, here, hold on.
When will the,
Nope.
when will the reprints be available?
Oh, I can do them today, yeah.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I'll hand give you one for sure.
Other questions? All right, if you think some, we'll have time at the end, so let's go ahead to Stuart.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Stuart Leith. I teach in the illustration department, and I teach ZBrush, which is 3D modeling, 3D sculpting, some Blender. I teach concept art, and I teach perspective in first year as well. So I'm kind of on the tech side of illustration. I'm not like a super traditional illustrator. And for my AI-assisted project, I wanted to see if I could make a game. I've always been interested in game dev. I've always loved playing games, and I like the technical aspect. So, you know, for this project, when it was pitched to me as, you know, put something in the gallery, something related to AI, I thought, well, I want to use it for something that I can't do. Very similar to what George was saying here. You know, my weakness is coding. Like, I can do the art, I can do the modeling, I can do the texturing, I can do a little bit of animation. I'm not good at it, but I can't do coding. Like, that's a whole nother really huge thing. So I go, well, you know, I've heard that AI can help me with coding. How can I get it to help? So that was my challenge, and I'll show you here. So yeah, my question, can ChatGPT help me build a video game? So I'm gonna, if I can read this. So I wrote, this is what I wrote. I just copy pasted what I typed into ChatGPT. I said, I want to build a turret for my 2D game. So this was a specific mechanic. Now I want to say that I've been messing around with game dev a little bit, and this is all done in Unreal and blueprinting, for those of you that are familiar with the details. So I've been following tutorials. This isn't like I knew nothing about coding, nothing about game dev, and I just like, you know, only ChatGPT helped me. That's not the case. But there's a lot of little specific things that I don't know, right? Like I follow tutorials and I kind of know the big picture, some of the big architecture, where to put things. But this is a question that I had in particular of I want to build a turret that, you know, shoots at the player. This is a side-scroller Mario type game. You might have seen it. It's in the, you know, if you were in the gallery. So I wrote the question. I said, I want to build a turret for my 2D game. I want it to do a few simple things. I want it to sense when the player gets close. I want it to point in the direction of the player, and I want it to shoot at the player. How do I make this, you know, how do I make this work for my game? And I'm sort of breaking it down like this because that's how you sort of want to think in coding, right? You want to be very measured one step at a time. You gave me a whole bunch of stuff, right? You gave me like 5 pages, and this is sort of the relevant area, and I'm just going to stand up so I can read it better. So, and I'm trying not to get too technical here because, you know, I'm the same as you. When I first look at this, I'm like, what the heck is this telling you, right? Get actor location, okay, get for the player character, get the actor location for the turret, right? So get the location of both of the things, the player and the turret, and then it's subtract the vector. So I gotta subtract the vector, and then it's atlan2, right? Angle, output is angle radians, and then I have to convert radians to degrees. So like, because I know I need to do this math. I know I need the math of tracking one location to another location so that the turret knows where the character is, right? And then I go, you know, make rotator and then set relative rotation. So this is kind of like the code. These are the nodes that I need. And this is how I've implemented it. So again, I know enough that I know how to search for a node, and this is what it looks like in Unreal if you're doing blueprinting. It's just node-based, sort of, you know, left to right coding. So it's all visual coding. So I have my Hypatia is my character, the blue on the top, and then I have the bullet origin. I'm getting the location for both of those. Then I'm subtracting, right? I just have a minus. Then I have Atlan 2 radians. Like, I don't even know what that is. I still don't really, I mean, I know radians is like a measure of degrees, right? So I'm doing something with that, and then R2D is radians 2 degrees, so I'm converting radians 2 degrees because it wants that. And then I make a rotator, right? I'm making a rotation based on the degrees, based on the distance between, you know, the character and the turret. So I'm able, without even really knowing what I'm doing, like I kind of get it, but I don't fully understand it. I'm able to make something with a relative level of complexity, or at least like a basic to intermediate level of complexity. And you know, this is kind of one-to-one. In the gallery, I actually have the same example, and I've drawn lines between these. You can kind of see this is that. You know, Atlan 2. Here's Atlan 2. Here's R2D. You know, radians to degrees. And it worked. And then so if I come back one slide here, you can see this is just a screenshot I took of the game. The character jumping, the turret aiming up at the character, and it continues to shoot, and it shoots at the character no matter where the character is within. There's a sort of a clamp so that it can't shoot backwards and things like that, but within that area. So yeah, it's been really successful for helping me with this stuff. I put a few other examples of the kinds of questions that I would ask it here. So I'll just read through some of these and kind of explain briefly. So the question on the top is, I want to play a random sound between 3 different sound effects. What is a good node setup for this, right? Because if my character is getting hurt by a bullet, I want it to go like, ugh, right? But I don't want it to do that over and over and over, because that can be really annoying. So I was just thinking, well, what if sometimes it did and sometimes it did and sometimes it did So I've got those 3 sounds, and I don't know how to, I know it's possible, but I don't know how to do it. So I ask it, and it gives me a similar answer to the last one, and then I have the little node set up on the right. I know it just kind of looks like a mess of spaghetti, but that's essentially it. I've got the 3 sounds on the right, and then I've got a random integer that it picks on the far left, and then that random integer picks from one of those 3 things, 0, 1, or 2. So I don't have to like code it, I can just kind of plug this stuff in. And it worked really well, it worked right away, and I was like, this is amazing. And then the second one I have, is it a bad idea to put the code for for player switching inside the game mode blueprint? So I'll briefly explain this. In a game you have like architecture, right? Like you don't have all the code running all the time on a game, because that wouldn't be efficient. So you have, you know, kind of like packets of code, and I want to know where to put certain things. Like I have a key to switch between a character and the drone, so you can pick a drone out and you can switch back and forth. So I essentially have 2 playable characters. So I'm like, where do I put that code? It's kind of a higher level question. So I'm able to ask that, and it's very specific, right? Like I could look up a tutorial for how to make a character like do a run animation, or how to make a character jump a certain height, but something like this specific to my game, I find this really helpful. The third one I have, in Unreal 5, using blueprints, I created a drone character. I want to be able to stand on it. So I'm using the drone as a platform. So instead of double jumping, you can move the drone, and you can jump on the drone, and then you can continue to jump so that you can reach further distances. So I had the problem of, I say here, however, I think this is probably late at night because there's a lot of like typos, but this is the actual text. However, my seems to think, so I don't know, my character seems to think they are falling when their feet touch the drone. How do I make the drone a platform? So, you know, if you've ever done any game development, like you have to decide every little thing. Like nothing happens automatically. So I would jump on the drone, and then my character would just float on the drone. Like even though it's a solid surface and it's a hitbox, they would just kind of float. And like it doesn't understand that that's an actual surface, or that I want it to be treated like like a surface, right? Like a ground plane. So again, this one question gave me like 3 or 4 pages of information that I had to sort through. And the first thing didn't work, and the second thing didn't work, and I think the third thing worked, and I'm asking questions. It's really great because it can give me a response that I don't understand, and I just say, can you elaborate on number 2? I don't quite understand what you're talking about there. What do you mean make the ground plane a vector? You know, like something like that I'm like, what are you talking about? And that's super useful. So I eventually got that to work. And then the last one is, how can I turn physics off? How can I turn off physics once an object drops to the ground, right? Again, I'm not going to elaborate into this. I have a box that you can drop. The drone will drop a box that you can jump on and use. So it's kind of like a little bit open. I don't know, the game design, I'm trying to make it so you can just play with a lot of tools there. So yeah, so I had that, you know, again, just another little issue that I'm like, I dropped the box, but it goes through the ground. Something with my collision, my hitboxes, they're not lined up right. And so it was just a really big learning experience. it would have been impossible for me to do it without it. Another example here is the error code translation. Now this is just kind of gibberish, but that's why that's why I put it on here. It's gibberish to me too. Again, the very top one is the error message. So it's in quotation mark, blueprint runtime error, attempted to access bullet O2_C_0 via property K2 node, right? All of this stuff. So I just copy pasted the error, and then at the end of it I said, what does this mean? Because I might be able to parse this, but like it's a pain, and I really don't know what it's saying. So then the response is the lower part, and I'll just read the pink because what it does is it restates the question pretty much always. So it says, this usually means that the actor has been destroyed or is in the process of being destroyed, pending kill, and therefore cannot be accessed. So what was happening was my bullet was getting destroyed, and then the code was still trying to access that bullet to do something else with it. So I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It was able to take all that garbage on top. It's like now that I know what it's doing, I can read that and I can kind of understand it, but at the time I was like, I don't know, what is this? So it just really helped me clarify. And there's a lot of error. You're gonna get a lot of error codes like this in game dev, where you get this line of gibberish like this, and it's like, this thing is broken and this doesn't work, and you're like, how do I fix it? So it was really useful for that as well. Okay, so to sort of sum up here, there's three major ways that I found it to be really useful. The first one was an interactive manual. This isn't anything super, I mean, it is something that we couldn't do before, but all of this information is in the manual. I'm just accessing it in a new way. So for example, if I want to know, I'm trying to think of a quick example, but if I want to know something about collisions, having a bullet collide with an enemy, right? Like all of that is in the manual. But if I search the manual online, if I search collision, I'm gonna get like 1,500 hits on that keyword, and that's just not useful for me. So by being more specific and using ChatGPT, I can get really clear answers like what node should I use to convert radians to degrees, and it'll just tell me, because otherwise it's really hard to search for it. The second one is that it made me think in new directions. I want to say that it wasn't always right. It was wrong quite often. I don't want to say 50% of the time, but it might be listening to me. It was quite frequent that it would just be wrong, and I'd be like, "Are you sure you're talking about Unreal 5?" And I'd be like, "Oh, you know what? They changed that." And I'm like, "Okay." But it always made me think in new directions. So even if it wasn't right, it would give me a whole bunch of stuff to think about, because so often you're just stuck, and you've got a problem and you're just, I don't know what to do. And it would give me something, I go, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll try that. Everything you told me is a lie, but now I have a new idea. So that was actually really helpful. And then the last one was, there's kind of two parts here really, but writing out my questions clarified them. So in coding, everything needs to be very logical and step by step. First you do this, then you do that, then you do this thing, in this situation you do this, right? So writing it out just to ask the question, like, if the character is inside of the range of the drone, and then I turn on the drone, and then the drone goes out of range, will the drone start shooting at the character again? Will it keep shooting it, right? Like all this kind of stuff. So writing this out really helped me. So even that conversation, even before it responded. But I would say also just having that back and forth. Like if you're on a small team, I think you can always talk to somebody. You can kind of roll your chair over and be like, "Hey, buddy, I have this idea. What do you think? What I should do here?" And you don't have that all the time, especially if this was like just pretty independent, totally independent project. So I could always just put a question out there, just to get a response, just to kind of get me thinking out loud and writing stuff out loud. So that was really useful. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Any questions for Stuart? Out there. All right, I'm gonna go up there and then come back to you, Marty.
I just had a question about when you got the coding information and then you turned it into the linear, did you just copy paste that, or was that actually?
So if we come back here, it gives me this and these keywords. I can kind of search for these inside the code, and so it gives me but the name of the thing it would give me, like, radians to degrees or something like that. I can type that in, and then it would give me a node, and then I could plop that in. So I couldn't literally like copy paste. I know for people that are coding, like doing text coding, more traditional coding, you are able to in some circumstances, just literally copy and paste things. So, but it depends on what you're doing. Cool.
Hey, Stuart, it's really great that you're working on this. One thing that we teach to our students in VR is talk to the duck. And so this is a concept that comes from the pragmatic programmer, but that idea of clarifying questions has been very consistent in the industry for a long time. So I think that's a really great point to bring up. So if you ever see a computer science student with a duck, it's probably because of
Okay,
that.
cool.
But the question was, I'm pleasantly surprised that you've explored this and you're actively working on it. Could you give me a timeline of like from, I think I'm gonna try this, and how much effort was involved in creating your game?
So I think for this game, I started at the beginning of summer. So it was like around May when I really got into it more seriously. A little bit before that I was kind of playing with it. And I spent a ton of time on it. Like it was, I mean, if that's kind of asking like the timeline, it was probably like 2 solid months of me working on it. Just like all of my spare time, I guess. It's, yeah, I mean, as you know, anybody that's worked in game dev, like this stuff is really, really time consuming. And especially because I had to redo stuff. Like I have whole huge systems in this game. Like I have stamina systems, I have melee attack systems, I have all kinds of stuff that I didn't even make the cut. So I'm doing all this coding and stuff that then gets totally taken out. I had shields at one point, I had bullets, slow time, I had all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, I just worked on it pretty consistently. I will say I came into it last summer. I did a similar project to kind of, because I've been interested, and I did a top-down, and I kind of remade Snipes, which is like a 1980s DOS game, and I remade that just and played around in the summer when I had time. Sort of dropped it for 9 months, and then when the summer started again, I go, I want to do another project, and I'm going to try to make it a little more complicated. So,
Kirsten?
Did you ever find yourself running into like memory or context issues where you expanded on something and then expanded on something, and after a few times of doing that, it kind of forgot what the original problem was? I'm just curious if you ran into that.
I did, yeah. I don't know if it was a technical limitation. It's just more that I would go down one train of thought, and then I would, if I want to backtrack, like, oh, tell me more about number 2, and I would go down number 2. I wouldn't trust it to just say, oh, tell me more about number 1. I wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So I would kind of get in the habit of just restating a question from the very beginning, and I could even copy paste my original question, put it down there. It would give me a approximation of the same answer, and then I could go from there. So yeah, that's kind of an issue that I think is good to be aware of with these systems.
All right. We could take one more now, then we'll have time at the end for everyone if anyone has a burning Stuart Leith question. All right. Let's go to Vlad.
Hello everybody, I'll get up, I can't sit for too long. So hopefully this is me. Hello again, my name is Vladimir Stanishevsky. I'm gonna tell a bit about myself. This is me and my wife and a daughter. I'm just throwing it out there because I personally like when I talk to people and see them, I wanna know like who they are a little more. Also, if you didn't pick up from my accent, I'm not from here, I'm from New York. No, that's a joke. I'm from Russia. I grew up there, and I'm pretty much all my family is still there. Me, my wife, and a kid, we just moved to Florida a year ago. I graduated from Ringling College myself, so I'm like a husband. Blessed father twice. You see one here, my wife's pregnant with the second one. So we're expecting in December, very excited. And Ringling alumni 2016 from computer animation department. That's why I teach right now. And animation, my work experience mostly started as 3D animator, CG journalist, then in kids TV shows I work as story artist, which is storyboarding, writing, and even got a chance to direct, mostly commercial and small projects. And now I'm here bringing in animation faculty. So that's quick about me. My project was face mix. I don't know how many of you tried it. I never done anything like that. And again, you will get to know soon that's not like fully me. It's mostly just stuff I found and made it work. Some images you see here indicate is, all this stuff most of you probably know. Do you guys play with like anything like oh, I see it, there's a camera thing. Okay, thank you. Do you play with anything like Midjourney? Can you raise your hands? Like anybody who play with visual pictures generation? Half of you. What about video generation? Like Runway, or like something. Okay, fewer. So okay, that's images you see. That's a Leonardo, for example. I just type very quick prompt, make a face mask, something cool looking. Here it gives it to me. Face mix videos. I was like, oh, I want a video of like faceless person, a bunch of faces in the back. He has produced me that video in about 7 seconds. It's free as well so it's like Luma and AI. It's not like phenomenal, but it's pretty impressive from where it was like half a year ago. And that's been off pretty quick and again free. What it can do or cannot do. So here's experience. So that's a thing I'm going to talk about. That's what I kind of made work in the. You can go and test yourself, choose any face and play with it. It does fantastic, as you saw, with somebody who's somewhat similar to you, like with the hairstyle, and maybe like skin tone and somewhat facial proportion. It's the whole point is like matching your face specifically, nothing else. So here we go. This is me yesterday, actually not yesterday, probably at 1 a.m. today, prepping this. So forgive it's not imperfect. He thinks it's not working too well, and I'm not that skin tone, I'm not that ethnicity, so that's where you can see imperfections. But still pretty impressive. Let's see some more. Okay, age, you can tell that's probably their body, if not that old, but you can see it's still impressively doing a great job. It's real time, and that's why I wanted to push it and see what can AI do? I mean, I know its capabilities if you give it time and prompt and so on. What can it do real time? Like, can it just do now? And that's me goofing and playing with this. And even that, I was like, wow, I can look pretty, but weird. So now I'm gonna skip that and let's not do that. So anyhow, so why that? Why is this? I kind of already mentioned. I'm subscribed to some AI, top channels whatsoever, what's happening, just to know what's up. And one of those things is just brought up face swap right there, deepfake. So I was like, wow, I wonder how good is it? What can it do? So I just dived into it, looked how it works, and here's the breakdown. I'm not an IT guy, even though it says computer animation. It's not like, again, like I'm doing a bunch of coding. It's also not like you hit a button and it's done. No, there's like kind of between that. You have to know a lot about animation. I'm not gonna dive into it, but it's like between the artist and technology kind of deal. So how it works for this face mix setup? Mostly it's like, can you raise hands who knows what GitHub is? Okay, most of you, you're amazing. Okay, great, I didn't know much about it before. But that's where like you can get a lot of like coding for free for open source. It's like, people put their licensing, you guys probably know more than I do. So that's the way I went for this deep life cam fake. I had to install some things with PowerShell. Chocolate is a Windows project manager that allows you to kind of make it easier for yourself. So there's some coding. You have to get Git, which is like basically explaining really good between distributed versus centralized. So in this case, you're working off your own machine. Then converter, or really demix and encoder, FFmpeg. So there are a few things you have to install, make sure they are running. I'm just going to skip through them. I want to use my GPU for better results. Models, that's the big things again. What's already Kurt been mentioning, he was talking about LoRa's, which as I understand is like basically, and help me out, it's like a kind of smaller version of model really. It's like training that specific data set can give you more specific results versus like models are usually much bigger data sets. So for example, for this one, I believe some models that I used, we're talking about 250 million data sets, like, or sometimes like huge numbers that's like would take forever for you to set up, but it's already training. You can just take that and it already exists and it's open source. So I used a couple of them. One was, you can see the different models there. So the input image on the left, and there's different models that are there, and the one on the right, that's a GFP Gen. And there's some other good ones right now, like Adobe has fantastic of their own, and but that's the one I ended up using. It looks pretty, gives great results. And the other one is SideFace, which is like basically instant face swapper. And it's like they probably also using others code from to begin with, but that's the one I worked with. So like here's another famous face for our school. And what I want to show here is like how, please notice, besides me being very excited and a bit, that it's holding on fantastically well. Just pay attention to the qualities, like again, I'm gonna rotate my head around even though it's not perfectly age and skin tone kind of like myself, but you can still see this like, again, if there would be somebody who closer to me looking, and look at the light, here's me just messing with the light, please pay attention to the screen. It's phenomenal, it's real time. And it's again, I'm using GPU on pretty good machine, but again, this type updates all the time, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get faster. So like, I also, for fun, trained another AI vocal for the Larry's voice, because there's a lot of him talking, and you can get anyone who's like out there and training. So like, basically, I could fake visual and vocal as another person. So like, that is scary, exactly. So like, let's come to this kind of end conclusion. Okay, what do we see, and who are we, and what do we see on screens? Okay, that's a scary world, what's gonna happen? And those are questions have place to exist, and what's gonna happen we don't know, and can we trust things I don't know. But what I want to really bring back is like kind of where we started from, not to focus on that, but focus on what am I, and what can I make the difference, and what's actually more important. Because it's not maybe about things how they look and what other people say, but it's more about like what you choose to do with your personal life, where it comes to down like the people that you meet, the people, colleagues you work with, your friends, your family, and those things like, those are real. And there's the real people who need real help sometimes, and there's things, the virtues that's the most important in the world, and most people would agree, like love or kindness, you can't see them. So that's where we see a lot of fake visuals, but the most important things you can't see with your eyes, like love. You can't really see it, you can't really touch it. So maybe that's the time when we finally stop focusing on what we see and focus on what actually we don't see, but it's more important. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Vlad. Any questions for Vlad? Yeah.
Hey, so I find, I mean, the technology that you displayed is like really incredible. The fact that you were able to basically get other people's, especially celebrities' faces, and be able to match it well with your own, and even use facial expressions. However, this also does bring up one concern that I have as it's even more and more advanced. Is there not a potential concern for possible legal consequences or any legal issues, maybe even copyright or defamation, if it's used in that sort of way?
100%, yeah. So it's like, that's like kind of what I raised my question myself, and that's like, my solution is like, focus on more important than that. But again, like, as anything, tools in the world, like, you know, you can say about an atomic bomb. When it was invented, did you invent it for that? What it was used for? Not so much, really, originally. So it's like, there are things that tools that can be used, I mean, kitchen knife, you cook with it, probably use it every day. So it's like, yeah, it's up to human nature, and see what happens. I mean.
Are you saying guns don't kill people?
No, they do. But like,
Uh,
sometimes they protect them too.
So, other questions for Vlad? Oh, right here.
Have you tried this with non-realistic faces, like or like aliens or something that's humanoid but not wholly human?
The model that I used was heavily trained on only human faces. So I actually haven't, but I would be pretty surprised if it does anyhow good, because like the numbers I mentioned, 250,000 databases, or actually, sorry, I think billion basically. That's all the facial stuff was set up. So it's really not meant for that. But if you train on something that's like, again, like even animals, a database, or you train on something like that, you probably can find models for that, or make one, as we Curtis was telling them about like lores, how you can teach things and learn machines for that.
All right, any other questions? All right, we'll come back around. Morgan.
Check, check. Good afternoon.
Hi.
My name is Morgan Wolverton. I'm with GameArt, and there I am. So I guess I would just start by saying that I've been pretty blessed in my life, that the entire span of it has been spent with creative aspirations, and I've been able to always do that, which I really appreciate. And that started with drawing and painting. And so I started, you know, way before AI or even computers or anything, and it's always been about that private experience of drawing and painting. And what I discovered when I went on to college was that there are processes that are very involved, and magical things can happen in that journey. So I got into printmaking, etching, lithography, woodcuts, And what I noticed was you start with an idea, and then as you carry on with that idea, something intervenes, whether you have to put the copper plate into acid and the bite lasts too long, or something goes wrong with the levitator and the stone, but there's some imperfection or something that you have to contend with. And usually that can be an annoyance or it can be an opportunity. And I really started to appreciate the opportunities that those posed to me. And that started to become kind of a hallmark of my process, is just involve steps along the way and being attentive at every step to see if there's an opportunity for change or diversion or some kind of bifurcation where it goes in a different direction. And usually that's the most exciting bit, you know, because I get carried away. You know, if you talk to me, you'll know that. And so there's usually somewhere along the way where it's like, oh, wait, there's this. And then so what you end up with is very different than what you originally started with. And then so to me, that's super exciting. And so this series right here is kind of a mini series called Prison Box, which is inside of a larger project that I'm working on called Street Peep. And Street Peep started probably about 20 years ago, and it was me just walking around the streets and finding things and just being like, oh geez, what is that? And you know, kind of like an archaeologist who like digs through garbage and finds something and you try to sort of figure out what's going on with the culture that created that. That's kind of the way I feel about Street Peep. And I was just talking to Jeff. It was very serendipitous because as I was walking over here, I found this little bent piece of copper that is very suggestive. It's been flattened out, it's been run over, but if you kind of squint your eyes and look at it, it becomes something of an archway. And so what I was doing for a long time is I was just collecting these things like some sort of demented entomologist or something. But then I would incorporate them into my drawings and, you know, sort of use them as a point of departure or something like that. And with this series, I've kind of gone full circle where I actually take these and I build dioramas. So I build like little miniature worlds out of them, and then I photograph them. And I use all the, you know, traditional conventions of photography, which, you know, is funny if you think about tradition of photography, which was not unlike AI, you know, was a disruptive thing back in the day. But I photograph them, and then I would bring them into AI, and I would kind of play around with that. And then I would sort of see what would happen if I, you know, kind of, I don't know, give it almost like a Photoshop filter. Just put some seasoning on it, not very much usually, just a little bit. And then I bring it back into Photoshop, and then I hand paint dust and bokeh effects and more light and whatnot. And so here's another one.
I'm going to turn off the lights here.
Yeah, they're pretty dark. And then here's yet another one. So these like are pieces of just broken off pieces of plastic that I found in the street that I turn into windows. And then you can see right here, this is, I build the world and then I light it and I use trash bags or whatever I can to kind of modulate the light to create different effects. And that becomes the end result. The goal is to create a new world that is sort of backward looking at the things that I find on the street peep, and that becomes kind of a backwards portrait. And you know, I really have fun with them, honestly. And like I said, this is one of probably 7 or 8 projects that I have working in simultaneously. Like I still do paintings, I still do daily pieces, I still do drawings, I've got animations, I work in Unreal, but this is just one little subset. But you know, finding this AI opportunity really unlocked a whole nother level of possibility space with this, which is really exciting. And I will say this about AI. When I used to be a painter and a drawer, I was quite a Luddite. You know, I just was not really interested in computers. And a friend of mine, who I grew up with, and we just drew together, that's what we did. he showed me, he figured out something and he did this thing with the computer and he showed it to me. I was like, oh crap, you did that? He's like, yeah. Oh. And I just looked at it for a second, and then the whole day I just was kind of mulling in my head. It was a video game asset, and he sort of made it move, right? And by the end of the day, I was like, I think my life just changed, which really sucked because I just built a studio to paint in. Like literally just finished the studio, and then I had to go into, and get into this whole 3D thing. But it was pretty much that day that decision was made. And it was the same experience that I had when I saw somebody using AI for the first time. I was telling Kurt about this. I just was kind of pissed off that day, and I was just kicking around the house, and my wife was like, what's going on? It's like, yeah, I just saw something. I think my life is going to be different because of it, and I don't think there's really any going back. She said, what are you talking about? It's like, I can't really explain this to you, but I just saw something I never thought would be possible, ever possible, that something that I just saw could happen. And so I have complete empathy for all of the varied points of view that people have about AI. I get it. I do too. But as an artist, I can't help my urge when I see a new tool, I latch onto it, whether it's etching or painting or lithography. I see something where it's like, your creativity can fill that vessel, I'm going for it. I'll figure out the ramifications later. And that's just been my attitude creatively my whole life, and so far, so good. But AI does have very serious concerns. For me, particularly, power usage. Like, we gotta figure that one out, because the world does not have unlimited power, and there are consequences. So anyway, thank you all very much.
All right. Questions for Morgan? Any hands up around? So in that piece, can you tell me, like, oh, I'm sorry.
Could you just clarify what, because you showed us the setup of what you're photographing there, and what is that figure then in the outcome digital AI, or what's the?
So yeah, can you go back to the other one because we can see it better? Like, where's the AI in this?
So the program I use is Wamba, and what I like about Wamba is you can use it like a seasoning. You can basically say, I just want you to wisp the edges. It doesn't need to be clobbering it with fully generative AI where you're just creating whole new images. And so that's part of the process for me, is like figuring out just how much AI is going to be involved in this. And like, so for instance, the ground there is AI altered, but it started as cat litter. You know what I mean? And I went and got a bunch of cat litter and sprinkled it in with leaves and things like that to give the AI something to hang on to. And then you can kind of dial it up and down and say, like, okay, let's just give it 10% AI and see if that's enough. And then I think that these images probably, if I remember right, are sitting at around 85% traditional imagery, just photographs, and about 15% AI manipulation. So, that's, for me, the AI sits somewhere in the middle. It's not on either side.
All right, other questions? Do you have another? Okay. So I'm gonna circle back around to all of you, but actually, well, let's go back to Stuart. So Stuart, in addition to the work you did here, you are, with me, one of the two faculty who have taught AI courses here at Ringling College, and I think folks would be interested to hear about your experience last semester teaching your course, so maybe you could tell us a little about that.
Sure. So I taught a course in academic affairs. It was an elective course, and it was I forget the title, AI image making.
Techniques and processes for AI or something.
Yeah. So and what I did was there was maybe 7, 8 assignments in the class, and each assignment was sort of almost a different major. I really wanted to, because this course was an elective and it wasn't under any particular major, right? It was academic affairs. So every assignment was kind of inspired by a different major. I had one that was
Well,
There's a-
make a viz dev.
The photo, that was one of them. I was trying to think of the first, what is photo when you do like a photo?
You did the food photo shoot.
Document, like a photo documentary kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a viz dev like project, right? And usually in a visual development class or concept art class, you would take the whole semester, half a semester to develop, you know, characters and an environment, and I did all of that in 2 weeks. And then I did a card game where they had to change an existing card game like Uno and then design all the cards for it in like a week and a half, and then we printed and played the game. We did a commercial, we did some video stuff, so they had to make a 30-second commercial for imaginary object or product, and so they did that. And so it was just really interesting to see how far we could push it. And I told the students pretty honestly, I was like, this is, you know, you're guinea pigs. We're all guinea pigs. You know, this has never been taught before. This has never been done before. You want to see, I want to see, like, what are the limits of this? And it was a really unique class for me to teach because usually, like, I know what the students are capable of. I know what to expect from the technology when I'm teaching, you know, perspective drawing. It's like, I know what can be done. I know when they've hit the limits and things like that. But with AI, I mean, often they would come to me with a product and it would be, you know, 75% of the way done, and they'd be like, I can't get it any better than this. And I'd be like, well, let's see what we can do. And then I'd be like, you know, I can't get it any better either. It just doesn't get any better, you know, because AI has its limits right now. And I said, that's okay in this class to kind of, we're seeing what we can hit up against. And I think that's going to be really useful for them. And all the polling and stuff done at the end of the class, the students said it was all, you know, it was all very favorable. Because, you know, if you get a job and you're working in this, they can tell the art director and say, this is what AI would be useful for, and this one's not useful for. Or if you're looking at a portfolio, you know, I have a much better sense of looking at something or designing something that could be made with AI versus what can't be done, because it has its weaknesses, and of course that's changing. But it was a good class. It was an interesting class. It's tough to kind of learn at the same time. I mean, I was always a few steps ahead of the students, but just. Because of the technology and the software, you know, Midjourney, I would come into class and I'd go, hey, you guys, Midjourney just has a new update last night. You know, now you can do face swaps or whatever into different images. This is great. It's going to be perfect for our project. And then we would all, you know, I would go and I'd go home that night and I'd research all this stuff, and then I'd come and I'd do a lecture on it the next day because it was just that cutting edge. So, yeah, it was.
Does anybody have any questions for Stuart about that class or general AI offerings here at Ringling? Yeah.
I was just wondering, what term is this class offered in, like spring term or fall term?
It's offered in the spring. It was offered in the spring last semester. I don't know what the schedule is going to look like next semester.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Keep a watch out for it. We're hopefully in the spring we'll offer it again. Trying to figure it out. So.
Hi, I think this is a question for the brains, all the brains at large. We work in public schools, so in the whole of the U.S., there's the areas that you can use it, there's the areas that you can't. But as higher ed, what would be best?
So we can all speak to this. I'll start since I've got the mic. I think my personal, it's kind of opinion based at this point. My personal opinion is that it should be used in the last 10% of the education. And the only reason I don't want to say I'm pushing for it, because I'm really not pushing for it as much as interested in it like all of us, but the industry's using it, and the industry's interested in it. And if my students are going to go out into the world and have to use it, and have to be aware of, like I said, the limitations and all that, then I want them to be aware. I don't want them to go out, you know, just having your head in the sand is not a good idea. So, but you don't need that the whole time. Like, I'm not an advocate of sticking it into first year or second year or even third year, honestly. I just think it's something that needs to be shown and so people can understand it. And, you know, as it gets integrated into the pipeline for at least the animation industry or for game industry, yeah, maybe we bring it down the pipeline a little bit because we need to teach the pipeline. But right now, my personal opinion is that it doesn't need to be in the early parts of the education.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much for saying kind of, I think many of us would agree. I totally agree with Stuart, but also I would think of an analogy for this. We're just talking analogies. How many of you guys in your schools or high schools use calculators? Can you raise your hand if you did? So, for example, in Russian high school, we are not allowed to. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, you know, honestly, all the operations that sometimes people struggle to make in mind, like, it's not so hard if you did it for 11 years in a row. You kind of like, okay, you got a hang of it. And then when I went to like study abroad in Italy, they're like, oh, you have to have a calculator. I'm like, why? So it's like, and then the classes go and I'm fine without one. So like, and kind of catch up on the same speed. So there's nothing wrong with having a calculator. It's great when you can use one and it can get you faster, because when we got to do graphs, and there's graphs calculators, you know, like more calculus, advanced stuff, I was like, well, that's helpful actually. You know, I mean, I can estimate it pretty well because there's some formulas, of course, to that. But then it's like, the advanced you get, it still can shorten your time. But when you have a good foundation, that's what kind of Stuart was saying. So I think it's again like, when do you insert and so on? It's going to be schools, countries, choices, I guess, in the future. But like, it's good if you have some sort of, I mean, even here, you probably don't use calculators in first grade, do you? I mean, I hope not. So I was like, so you got to figure out 2 + 2 is kind of 4 thing by yourself without calculator at some point, right? And then at some, when do you start calculators? I don't even know, like in States. When do you guys like, allow it? Middle school? Which is like 6th grade? Like, for you?
6th grade? Oh, your question?
Okay, you're teachers, right? You should know.
I have a, well, we teach art. Dance and biology.
4th, 5th grade? So I would be worried if AI would get there, 4th, 5th grade. That would be scary. But hey, maybe that, I mean, we'll see how that goes.
I have a follow-up question because I feel like it's a little different because, no, it's a lot different. Because if we don't address it, it's not like it's not happening because we're not addressing it. Like it's still happening, but they're not learning the ethics, they're not learning why to choose to learn the traditional approach first so that you really understand. Like they're not learning any of that. They're just skipping it all and diving straight in. So it's like, it's a weird place because you can't not address it. It's happening whether you choose to or not.
I would agree. It's in the world. They need to be made aware of it. However, as I was saying before, I have a very ambivalent relationship with technology, and I think that giving them lots of hands-on experience before they even get introduced to it is the way to go. But yeah, you can't pretend it's not there.
Yeah, tomorrow is National Portfolio Day at Ringling, so I'll be talking to high school kids about their work, and I'm looking for all fundamental drawing skills. So they want to show me their Procreate stuff and their animations, and I have to explain to them, like, I just want to see drawings, and I talk to them about, drawing is about learning how to see, you know, slow observation, going to the park and drawing tree bark and seeing all the little shapes and the ants crawling on it and like really slowing down. And a lot of people who want to race ahead to the end, I let them do that, and then they hit this wall where they're like, I don't know how to make it better. And you kind of wait for them to come to you and be like, oh, let me teach you the fundamentals so that you have the power to make it better next time you hit that wall. So I hope that helps.
Over here.
This is like a question that relates to your question and your answers. But my question is more like a question that I don't think we should answer right now. It's a question, questioning the answers. Because I find it interesting that all of you guys are showing examples of how you're using it in a workflow. And those examples are not necessarily related directly to the outcome in a way that would be the direct goal of ours as educators. Like I have a learning objective for like every assignment, and then the total curriculum for the program. And there are many, many instances where even in kindergarten, I can imagine having a student find value in using a calculator to progress to the learning objective of an assignment. And that's not going to be a situation where I'm always going to have them using a calculator so that they don't learn their multiplication tables or anything else. I'm not going to ask you know, a junior or a senior in high school to do trigonomeric functions when they're learning vector software. Like they don't have to calculate like how to draw a Bezier curve, right? So and all of you guys show really interesting instances of using AI from a functional perspective and a holistic approach that enabled you to learn with an effectiveness that you would not otherwise have had. And I thought that was really interesting, that each of you as educators are talking about the thing that I find most in common with other educators, that we have this insatiable desire to learn. Like, I love learning. And I see how AI, and I didn't think about it that much. I was looking at it more as like a final output approach before this weekend. And now I'm looking at it more functionally. How does it become part of a more holistic process in our own creative practices and as educators? So I'll pose the question again as something that we can all explore as we're like, because we're all here and we're trying to figure this out at the same time. I want to know, how is AI going to help me expand this phrase that's come up a few times, the possibility potential, right? The potential space of expansion. How's it going to do that for me as an artist, as a human? And how can we work these things into the educational system, whether you're in pre-K? Because this is the reality, folks. Every student that we will see at Portfolio Day tomorrow is engaging with AI on some level if they're interested in visual information. So if we can then give an opportunity to sort of direct them and guide them in that, I think we're going to be benefiting the students a lot more, yeah. As opposed to saying, don't do it yet, let's wait till you're, and I understand the reasonings for saying that, because they need the observational skills, but that's a different skill set. They're not going to learn observational skill sets at any point through AI, but they will learn about functional things through AI. And so maybe in a holistic overview, there's a better way to address it, right?
Thank you so much for the question. This is a lot of those questions, we probably ask ourselves too, and that was probably one of them. You answered it yourself, kind of. For math, you don't give calculus to elementary kid. Similar thing. There's probably an approach when we do, but just in certain levels. For example, for the visual stuff, even it just debate which when we will have to figure out as we go with the time, and we'll know better by trial and error. But for example, I think it's a good one to start with GPT, see what that's capable, just to know, so the students understand what it is capable of. Start touching it in this class here and there. For example, one of the platforms, I think, George, you mentioned VSCOM, which does more like 3D rendering, also design for the character stuff. If you give it right away, then they don't know the fundamentals of character design. So you have to teach it, and then you can say, hey, you can apply this, and you can push it. And the way I look at this overall, it's more like kind of finding the reference. You can go online right now, Google appealing character, and it'll give you a picture. You're like, no, I have a boy character, this is a female. So you can be more specific, type in the words, but you won't get exactly a character which you have in your head. Now you can sketch really roughly, use that sketch, give description in AI, let's say one of the engines, and then you get very more specific reference. So back in the day, people used to go to the library. Still do some. Now most people use Google for a lot of questions. Now there will be AI. It's because it's going to be more specific to what Stuart as well said. His specific question, no YouTube tutorial for that yet, but he gets an answer. So that's another resource to get your specific answer for your specific question, your specific reference. But it doesn't eliminate those foundations. So I think there is a time for everything, and we'll be figuring out together when is what, I guess. Thank you.
So I'm going to jump in here as well. So I've taught, now this is my third semester teaching AI courses here at Ringling. And so I've had a bunch of different students from a bunch of different majors, first in a writing for AI course, and now for the second semester in a row, this fundamentals of AI course, so students from all majors. And what I found, and a lot of other educators in the AI and education space I've talked to have found, is that, and feel free to jump in or when you guys are up here, the students, especially here, are quick to see that it is not as good as them at the things that they are good at, right? It cannot write as well as our creative writing students. It cannot draw as well as our illustration and animation students. And so there's time where they're working through that frustration of like, this isn't giving me the thing that I have in my head, right? It's not going to give you the thing you have in your head. And if you have a vivid visual imagination or story imagination, like it's just slamming your head against a wall to try and get the AI to do that. But for things like we've done here today, like the four of them have done, right? This raising the floor in the areas where you're not an expert, learning a new thing or developing capabilities in an area where you just don't have the time to build up. That's where we're seeing all kinds of gains for people, and that's where we're seeing the productivity out in the workspace and things like that, right? AI is a proven, now we got lots of data, a proven productivity increaser for writing computer code, mostly for the earlier, younger, less experienced programmers, right? And talking to programmers, I know like top tier people, they're like, I don't really see the need. Unless they're so top tier that they don't actually have time to write code anymore, and then it kind of circles back around. But getting those people, up is in areas they otherwise wouldn't have any ability is one of the exciting areas, and it's one that we can sort of inculcate. Stealing from Ethan Mollick, some of you, who has heard of Ethan Mollick? Yeah, there you go. So Ethan Mollick, he's a Wharton Business School professor. He has a great book out, came out in April, called Co-Intelligence, and he has a really great free newsletter called One Useful Thing, and totally recommend all of those. So he's been on top of this, and he has been using it in his classes at Wharton, for now a couple of years. Actually, now if you want to give Ethan Mollick some money, he just started masterclass. Those masterclass. He has a masterclass in AI that he just, yeah. But his thing, this was great. This was the thing that I loved. An early assignment he gave to his business school students: do one impossible thing, right? You have to do something on this assignment that would otherwise be impossible for you, except now AI lets you do it. And to mixed results, of course, but that's, I think, where there's exciting potential there. But there's all this other stuff, putting around a framework of how to figure it out, how to be fluent or literate in this world of AI, and where those skills come in. But, it would be great if they could wait until they learned their foundational skills, but hey, did y'all see that Roblox just added text to 3D objects this week, right? So they're going to get it in Roblox, they're going to get it in, all those other things. So, Kirsten, you had something.
Yeah, I'm just curious, across your different disciplines you teach, can you gauge sort of the student sentiment on this in terms of sort of percentages that are embracing it versus having, I guess, positive feelings dominating versus negative feelings dominating? Do you have a ratio that, I'm just curious how that might vary across your disciplines?
If only we had somebody who did this already.
Yeah, we did surveys and things.
That was a year ago. We haven't done the new one yet, so.
There was a period where there was some paralyzing fear in a lot of the freshmen, where they're like, I'm not going to have a career when I graduate, and what am I even doing here? Why am I investing in learning this? Before they've even started learning anything. And then there was a lot of more high-level students who were just jumping on the bandwagon of industry professionals who were against it. So they're like, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to know about it, I don't want to engage with it, because this person I really like who works at Disney said it's evil, which I don't think is very healthy. But I couldn't break it down into percentages. My computer animation students a year ago were 100% against it. They did not want to engage in it. They were totally turned off. And then the following year, the mood had totally softened, and people were like, oh, I can tell it's not going away, and I'm curious about it, and I just want to understand it. And there was zero negativity towards it. So the mood changes fast, and I have no idea what to expect later. And whatever Instagram trend tells them to do, that's why I was listening to the previous question, and I really like being in higher education and in college, because we're not training employees for industry. It's a liberal arts education. We're trying to make people who are intelligent, curious adults who question things and want to learn the rest of their life. So that's an important lesson to teach all the students, not just this is how you model a box or something. But yeah.
forgot you had a question.
I would just thought I have the same vibe in my classes. It was funny. I was go specific instance. My freshmen, I teach freshmen and sophomores. My freshmen were like kind of like, this is weird. I don't know if I should be touching this. And more like negative side. Now I know specifically some of those freshmen are in the sophomore class with another instructor, and he told me like, oh, this freshman came up to me and asked, oh, can I use this app AI to help me solve this problem? So which I demoed the first year. So I was like, yeah, they were like kind of no, thank you, but now once they face the issues, like, oh, I see how it can be helpful to me, and now they ask for the instructor, can I use it? So I think it's like that learning curve, like you're like, oh, okay, this is bad. Oh, hold on a second, it's gonna help me out here. Okay, so it's like, yeah.
To kind of add to that, in game art, there's definitely a lot of students that are very concerned, and who could blame them, right? I mean, there's a lot of messages that they're getting in the world. This is disruptive, it's coming for your job, and they're just trying to get their career started. But I did do, I thought it was kind of an interesting thought experiment, because there's a lot of like, oh, it's gonna take away everything. I said, okay, let's just for a second, kind of close your eyes, and I want you to imagine that AI is going to facilitate and not guarantee you, but give you a career. That if you understand this better, that it actually will increase your chances at a career. And just kind of let that sink in, and then ask yourself how you feel about it. And make sure that when you're addressing these concerns about AI, that you at least are able to parse out what is an emotional reaction versus one that's based on data. Because it's very important to distinguish that, because it's a critical tool, and it's not going away. It absolutely will not. And so it's good to know the difference.
All right, we have a question up here.
I'm sort of a fossil from 1969, but I am all classically trained, as it were. I think, addressing the lady's question over here, it seemed like public education, the students need to be exposed to this in a way that they understand, because they're going to be exposed to it every day in the future, and we don't really know where it's going from here. We're all focused on art, and from what I've seen, most of the influence is rather fantastical. But I would like to see how it really helps illustration, animation, in ways that are more traditional, in imagery that's a little more understandable and traditional. I really see the benefit in gaming in creating world environments. But in response to Vlad's comment about calculators, did you have slide rules to work with, or were we just pen and pencil? Yeah, right, okay. That's digital, you know. But one thing I learned about slide rules is a couple of things. It teaches you to figure out what magnitude of answer you're looking for, and it teaches you to read scales. I've come across, I used to teach at Florida A&M, and in the classes that I taught, 50% of my students would be coming from Florida State. And it didn't make any difference whether they were male, female, black, white. 20% of them could not use a ruler to draw a line of a specific length. 20%. They were making mistakes like some rulers are printed with a little blank space before the scale starts. They would include that. Some people started not at 0, but at 1. And a line that was supposed to be 2 inches long would be 1 inch long. these are the little fundamental errors that would not occur if they had used the slide rule. There are other consequences that may occur in using AI that we can't foresee right now. But we need to start. And they need to start as early as they're able to comprehend it. Because the more experience they have when they get older, the better. We have 50% of the American population now that seems to be lost in fantasy. And I don't know where that comes from. But we need to be able to distinguish between the reality and the manufactured reality. And AI is I think, part of that.
Agreed.
Thank you. Yeah.
I want to add one thing to that I've been thinking about is just even within the room is just specificity, because AI is so broad, and I've been to a number of talks, and I think your question too alluded to that we talk about AI for image generation and for adding things to that, and we talk about it when it comes to deepfakes, and we talk about it when it comes to coding. These are all completely different things, and we use the same word AI for all of this, but they all have very specific problems and specific potential solutions, and so within groups, starting to be more specific about what we're talking about, I think will be helpful as we move forward.
Yeah, I have recommended Marcus Aurelius to so many students the last 2 years, because they're asking me deep fundamental questions about what it means to be alive and stuff. And I'm like, people have been talking about this for a long time. It's not an AI question. Yeah, there's something that I think about a lot related to climate change, that people have a fantasy that humans are so clever, so we'll think up a solution to the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, or that AI is going to solve society's problems or something. So I like what you said, and people should be more grounded and smarter, but I don't know how to do that. If people in my class don't know something or haven't heard of something, I like my job because I get to show it to them. Yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments? So we're gonna go into another sort of bigger, broader talk here about the future and things like that. Do you guys have anything you want to add about Ringling and that experience, sort of back focused on what we do here or your practice here, or just whatever you're about to say, Vlad, that's fine too.
Thank you. It's just I think right now, George kind of brought it to more wrap up, I think, even idea of the whole tool, what's AI and how it fits in our world. I just want also to add on that, I think it's really and also reference back to one of your guys, one of your questions was the ethics part and how do we teach that. I have right now, I don't know how many of you, but I have a daughter as a shadow, we have the second one coming, and then you start more thinking, once you have kids, you think okay, how are they going to be in this world, who they going to be taught by, who are going to be their teachers, people around them. You start asking many more questions like that, and I think the biggest answer I found myself is as far as I love my wife, and we've been as best human beings as we can be and fair and loving to our daughter, that's going to play biggest role in her life. So I think it's in the end of it's disregarding all the tools and what happens in the world, as far as we put focus on ourselves and what we personally can do, and come back in our lives. I like the expression about Lev Tolstoy, not being biased at all, he'd been Russian, but he says if you want to change the world, start changing from yourself. So it's start changing from where you are. So I think this is really important. It's for us now to think of all the world disasters and how we're going to fix them. What about you? What about getting up, fixing your bed? What about bringing apology when you actually messed up to someone? What about fixing a relationship with your parents? What about fixing a relationship with your spouse? What about that? And I think that's actually should be our priority. And then the rest of ethics and everything else will fall in the right place because our heart is in the right place. But if we choose to focus on the tools, then it's that's nothing going to go right because we don't have the foundation of the relationships within one another. But if I love my friends, neighbors, people who come here, I care for one of you, I would not make a stupid decision in AI because I care for the people around me. So I think, and there's no tool that's going to teach you that except love, genuine relation from you to another human being around you. So. and
All
that's-
right. Thank you, Vlad. That's great. So, thank you all very much. Thanks to all our faculty here. Another little round of applause, if you will.